Preston Bell Charles III. Indeed. A little bit more about Preston later. My name is David Levy. I am a founder and board member of True Theater, which is bringing, thank you, Cincinnati's longest running storytelling event, sharing true personal stories from people from all walks of life for the past 13 years. Thank you. And for 12 of those 13 years, we have had the honor and the privilege to present a show at the Fringe Festival called True Fringe, featuring artists, sponsors, producers, somebody associated with that year's Fringe Festival, sharing their true personal stories about something along their journey in the arts. So if you've been around this year's Fringe Festival, in fact, you've seen a few of our past True Fringe storytellers, including from Dad Hates Jokes, John Bennett, artist support sponsor, Mark Bowen, Fringe check guru, Doug Borntrager, Fringe producer, Katie Hartman, producing artistic director of the No Theater and Fringe Whatever You Need Right Now, Andrew Hungerford, from Granny's Fix It, Dawn Larson, Rut Rose, Bridget Leak, dearly departed's Kareem Washer. Holy cow, did you see that last night? Once Upon a Lie's Paul Strickland, community sponsor Jeff Cerrone, and if you count an audio-only appearance via pre-recorded voiceover, Derek Snow from Wrappings. And if you add in people associated with this year's Fringe who've shared stories at some of our main stage shows, that number jumps up tremendously. But people, it is not only artists of talent who are able to tell stories on our True Theater main stage shows. We open those up to everybody. And we are now looking for stories for our July show. It's at the end of July, and the theme is gifts. So if you have a gift-related story, you know somebody who does, send them to our website, or you go to our website at truetheater.org and let us hear from you. We are currently in the process of putting that show together. So love to hear from you if you have a gift-themed story. And that's enough about that. That's not even what you're here for. Folks, at True Theater, we always say that everybody has a story to share, and the only difference between strangers and friends is the sharing of that story. And tonight, you're going to make 4 new friends. Of course, given that this is the Fringe audience, you're probably friends with these people already. Nevertheless, hello, Katie. Hey, I'm so glad to have you guys here. All right. Our first storyteller tonight is a non-binary, queer, multidisciplinary artist and performer who has been devising, performing, and producing clown shows since 2012. They grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where as a small child, they set up a stand on the street, not to sell lemonade, but to vend their handcrafted lawn gnome skulls, complete with long point on the top, which explains their iconic upright cone-shaped hats. From those humble beginnings to their contribution to this year's Fringe Festival, which closed just earlier tonight, they've been coming up with clever ways to describe the otherwise unexplainable. Please welcome first-time Cincy Fringer from Portland, Oregon, the creator and star of the hilarious and personal Anatomica, Amica Hunter.
Hi, that's me. That was all me. Okay, so I want to tell you a story about things that can go wrong on stage. Specifically, when you're on stage, your body changes states. So your heart rate goes up. Your adrenaline is up, and you're paying attention. Your blood is pumping hard, hopefully staying inside the body. but not always. So I guess I should go back and tell you, as mentioned in my bio, I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a very dry place. High mountain, high desert. The air was so dry that I grew up thinking lotion was a fundamental necessity. It's not a luxury thing for your skin. Like if you didn't put lotion on after you took a shower, when you bend over to tie your shoes, you feel the skin on your back just like crackle open. So it wasn't surprising to me that as a kid I got a lot of nosebleeds. It kind of runs in the family. My dad would tell me stories of being a kid himself, and he said he would get a nosebleed in the middle of the night while he was asleep and not notice, and then wake up with his face glued to the pillow. And the pillow would come all the way up with him, just blood glued on. So, but to me, I was like, that's just what happens, right? So I got a lot of bloody noses, and from a small age, I knew how to make what I would call a toilet paper bullet. Pack it really tight, toilet paper bullet, and cram it up there. So, I remember one particular time when we were on a road trip. We were going camping as a family, and I got a bloody nose, and my dad was not going to stop the car for that because that's just a routine thing. So, he handed me a Kleenex, and I, stuffed it up my nostril. But then I could feel this sort of unsettling pressure start to build in my face, like I was in water. When you've sucked water up your nose, and I could feel my sinuses fill up with blood, and then it started coming out the other nostril. So no problem. We still didn't stop the car. I just got some more toilet paper and plugged up that side of my nose. And when we finally stopped for gas, my dad looked at me, and with just a casual amusement in his voice, he just said, "Oh, cool, you're crying blood." Because the tear ducts are connected, and so I had started to, I know, it sounds awful, but it doesn't hurt, that's just what was happening. So that's just one of many times that happened. And, and growing up, I got so many nosebleeds that I would try to do creative things with them. I remember I painted a picture in my... I was into painting, so it was a mixture of acrylic and facial blood on canvas. It was a ballerina going like this, made of blood. And then I went through a phase where I fancied myself a witch, and I had all my little Wiccan crystals and dirts, and I had a little vial of my nose blood sitting there. It wasn't great, but I was just finding things to do with it. And then when I graduated high school, I moved out to Portland, Oregon, which is not a dry environment. It's nice and damp. I didn't have to put lotion on after every shower. That was a luxury thing for fancy people again. And my nosebleeds went away. Or so I thought, for a few years. And then all of the sudden, it started happening again, routinely. And it happened so often that I decided I needed to do something about it, because by then I had been performing regularly, and I thought, eventually this is going to catch up with me, and it's going to happen at an inopportune time. So I was proactive. I went to the doctor, and they opened up my nostril with a speculum. Believe it or not, it's the same name of the device. There's a nostril speculum. It's the same as the one for other holes, but a little smaller. And so they speculum to open my nose, and they put some sort of caustic chemical in there to cauterize. Yes. So they were shrinking those blood vessels, and I thought that would be the end of it. And then I got a gig. I was working with my clown partner at the time, and we drove all the way out to Wyoming, to the high mountainous area. High elevation, and we get there, and we're doing a show that is nonverbal, so we're just physical comedy. Maybe you saw a really cool show like that here last night, so you know what I'm talking about, that type of show. And so we don't talk during the show, but we move around a lot. It's very energetic. We were doing some acrobatic stuff even. And when we got to the theater, the technical director said, "Oh, so we've got a tank of oxygen in the back. Sometimes the more physical shows, you'll pass out. So we just have a tank of oxygen in the back, so if you need to just go in between so that you don't pass out, that would be great." And I was like, okay, I've never done that before, but sure, all right. So the show gets going, and it's a small town, so the whole town is there. They're all packed into this auditorium. It's like the event of this town. And we're out there in our light beige costumes, doing things, right? And I'm feeling a little winded, so when I go off to change, I huff on the little oxygen machine thing. And I come back out, and I have my hand inside of a balloon, an inflated balloon, right? So I can't really use it, but I feel a trickle start to happen. So I turn up stage, and I try to catch it in my other hand, and I'm frantically whispering to my clown partner, like, for some reason in my mind, I thought, pretend to hit me. Then it will make sense. You know? So I'm whispering, like, hit me, pretend to hit me in the face. You know, because of course, in hindsight, that's the wrong thing to do. And luckily, he was like, no. So I make an excuse. I'm kind of doing things like this. I make an excuse to go off stage. And this woman who's hired us, it's a strictly professional relationship, is waiting in the wings with a water bottle and a trash can. And she pours water over my blood hand to get the, you know, and then she makes a toilet paper bullet and sticks it in my nose for me because I have my hand in a balloon. And I go back out like, no problem, right? But I feel that same familiar feeling. It's rising, and I'm like, yeah. And then, sure enough, it starts gushing out the other side. Like, I'm talking like a water fountain, and it's splattering all over my tan costume, and it's pooling on the stage. And people are starting to murmur and get restless, you know, and as a trained clown, I'm aware that a lot of people think they're afraid of clowns, and I try to dispel that. But then I see in my mind's eye, like, my bloody grin and my blood everywhere. And sure enough, a kid somewhere near the front yells, "Why is your face bleeding?" And for the first time in my life, I completely broke character in that show, and I just started talking, and I said, I don't know. It just happens. I'm okay, you know, it doesn't hurt, but I think we should have an intermission. It wasn't a show with an intermission, but we had an intermission. And so we went backstage, and I guess they were very worried, and they found a doctor in the audience. And so this man rushes backstage, and he's got an ice pack, and he's, you know, telling me, pinch here, lean back, you know, and I've heard it all. It's like, no, I'm not gonna lean back, and then I'm drinking it, you know, it's fine, it'll stop on its own. But turns out this doctor is from my hometown of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So, yeah, so he got it, he understood right away. So we bonded over that a little bit, and I ended up coming back out to finish the show, and the crowd was great, I think, because we had all been through something together. But yeah, we finished the show, and then, you know, I got to clean my own blood off the stage and call it good. And so it's sort of something that is always lurking around every corner for me. And I kid you not, in this week of coming up with this story and working with David on this story, just 2 nights ago, for no reason, so I sent a text like, you'll never guess what just happened. And part of me expected that to happen right here, right now. But we made it through another show without that happening. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So just know, it's sort of a bonus, right? It's like anytime you come to my show, it could happen. So if you're squeamish of blood, just know that that's always a warning on all of my shows. Thank you.
One more time for Amica. It was quite an experience waking up a couple of days ago with 3 pictures on my phone of exactly what Amica just described. Look at what happened. Very funny. Thank you, Amica. And then I forgot to bring tissues tonight as a just-in-case measure. All right, one on me. Our second storyteller tonight was born right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and raised. Yeah, all right, for Cincinnati. That may even be said a few more times tonight. So, she received a BFA in drama from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts and an MFA in dramaturgy from the University of Massachusetts. Yeah. Before, between, and after these proud milestones, she has served as the assistant director of an off-Broadway premiere of No Dogs Allowed by Sonia Manzano, is a founding member of New York's Pipeline Theater Company and Atlanta's Fabrication Theater Company, co-wrote and produced Josh and Toddy's racist comedy special, which I wish I could see somehow, worked as the company dramaturge for Wham Theater in the Berkshires and is the co-artistic director of Improv Theater in Los Angeles, currently works as the literary manager at the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, and has an HBO credit you're about to hear more about. And in what little free time she has, she enjoys improv, jazz, Star Trek, and medieval art. Put your hands together for the director of this year's Gentrification the Musical, Tatiana Godfrey.
Hell yeah. Thank you. I am Tatiana, and this is a story about how I was in an HBO film. I got the opportunity to sort of audition for the director of this film while I was in my 4th year at NYU. I was, the program was 3 years long. I was at the Atlantic Acting School. The way that NYU works is that you audition and they sort you like Hogwarts houses. So there's like the Stella Adler School for Acting, and there's a music theater school, and there was a Strasberg school, and I got sorted into the Atlantic Acting Company. And I was in my 4th year. The program's only 3 years long. I was a teacher assistant to the improv teacher. I do a lot of improv now. And the founder was coming to do a master class, and I was like, I bet I'm gonna take this master class and show up on a Friday to this master class. And he's like, he's revered. He's revered at the school. He founded the school. And so he's like, all right, I wrote the script. This is my impression of him. I wrote this script. Let me get a couple of volunteers and go out into the hall, memorize it, and then come back. I'll direct you in it. This is David Mamet. That's my impression of David Mamet. Oh, wow. People having reactions to David Mamet. So I'll take a moment to acknowledge what a problematic guy. Like super problematic. Like 100% acknowledge this. Like obviously his plays pretty misogynistic. I get that. Been making comments about trans folks, about like equating teachers and pedophiles. Problematic. He's old and like a recluse now. But he's hosting this masterclass that I show up for, and I get picked to be in this scene that he wrote, and my buddy who cut class that day to come to see this masterclass because we kind of revere David Mamet. I also my favorite movie is a David Mamet film, State and Maine. A lot of my inherent understanding of the way the dramatic structure works comes from reading his books like True and False and Three Uses of the Knife. Writing in restaurants, and so I'm super excited. I'm just like, yes, I'm gonna memorize this entire script and I'm gonna perform it. So we went out to the hall, we memorized it, and it was too long to memorize all of it, but we were like, let's just do as much as we can. We're gonna impress David Mamet. And he opens the door. He's like, all right, come back in. That's my David Mamet impression. Like, all right, there's a lot more cursing, but I'll edit that out. And we perform it for him, and it's like that acting school acting where it's like, I'm acting so hard right now. You can tell that I'm acting so hard. I am receiving all of the things that you are acting to me, and I am acting, I'm giving back to you. No, I am acting at you right now. That's the way we were trained to act, to be like giving our attention to the other actor. And then he'd be like, okay, so when he'd direct us, like, you sit down at this moment. Oh, when you say this line, I want you to sit down. I'm like, all right, David, man. I say the line and I sit down. It's like, no. When you say the line, it has to be motivated. The sitting has to be motivated. And I'm like, all right, David, man. And I do it again. He's like, all right, that's pretty good. And it was a great day. You know, David Mamet came and directed me in a scene. I get home, and I have a phone message, and I was like, oh, I don't recognize this number. Boop, bop, beep, beep. And I check my messages, and it's from David Mamet. And he's like, hey, Tatiana, I got your number from the teachers. I think you're really good at acting, so I want you to be in this movie I'm doing. I wrote it, I'm going to direct it, it's for HBO. I'll have the casting agent send you a script. And so I was like, all right, okay, great. And I got an email with this script of something to audition for. I submitted an audition to the casting agent. And they're like, okay, you got this role. We're going to be shooting in New York at the Brooklyn courthouses. Come do it. So I was just chilling in New York, and one day I'm in Central Park, and I get a phone call, and they're like, we're shooting tomorrow. Come to the Brooklyn courthouses. We'll meet you there. I was like, all right, bet. I'll see you there. Thanks. And I show up. I had to figure out what train to catch to get to Brooklyn. I'm staying with on a friend's couch in Upper Manhattan. And I catch a train and I show up and I'm like, all right, this is a movie set. I think this is where I'm supposed to be. And there's like a PA and I'm like, hey, feller. I was like flirting with him. I was like, oh, hey. I think I'm in this movie. And he's like, oh, really, you in this movie? And I was like, yeah, I actually think I'm in this movie. He was like, okay, what's your name? I'm like, Tatiana Godfrey. And he's like, oh, bet, you are in this movie. It took me to costumes. I was just in a trailer, and they put me in a suit. I was cast as the bailiff in the courtroom scenes. We were shooting in a courthouse of this movie. The movie was Phil Spector, about Phil Spector, the music producer who shot a lady in the face a few years ago. He's in jail now, if not dead. And talk about problematic. The whole premise was like, David Mamet has a reasonable doubt that maybe he didn't shoot that lady. He definitely did. But Al Pacino was playing Phil Spector, and Helen Mirren was playing his attorney. Jeffrey Tambor was playing a different attorney, another, like, talk about problematic. But so we're doing this thing, and I show up. I don't look like a bailiff at all, but I'm like, all rise. People versus Philip Spector, case number, whatever the case number was, let's go, or whatever the line was. I spend a day doing that. I do another day in an elevator being like, only these people can pass. I was like playing a bailiff. Al Pacino has like little tics that are like that. I think he shrouds and like, it's the method. I'm method acting. But they're like little tics, and he's like, oh, let me get a book and I'll act with this book. And then somebody runs and gets him a book, and he like has a book in his hand while he's acting, which was cool. He didn't really address me, but like on one day he was like, oh, Miss Bailiff. He knew what part I was playing. I was so impressed. But something that was really magical for me was one morning I show up, I'm just waiting, I have like a hot dog in my hand that somebody had gotten me, and Helen Mirren comes up and she's like, Tatiana, you're so strong, how do you do that? And I was like, I'm play pretend, Dame Helen. I was like, in my head, I was like, pot kettle, what? Why are you, one of the greatest actresses of contemporary time, saying this to me? And out of my mouth came, I'm a play pretend Dame Helen. But it was very magical. I felt like so redeemed in that moment as a person, as somebody who was trying to be an actor and do that with my life. I've since moved on to other things. And so when I tell this story, there are like so many magical things that happened. What a wonderful experience. I ended up later on tour here at the Children's Theater, and when the movie premiered, and I had to get HBO, I had to like pay for HBO Go, I think at that time was, and like download it on my phone, and we sat in the van, this like white unmarked van, my buddy and I, and watched this movie on my phone, and I was not in the film. I did not make the final cut. But you could definitely hear my voice being like, all rise, people versus Philip Spector. And so what I take away from this is every time I tell this story, which was like really an awesome experience, and I have to think about like, David Mamet saw me in a class and was like, oh, this person can act. I want to afford them an opportunity. And that means so much to me. That's how I've gotten ahead and gotten to the places where I have in my life. And simultaneously, which means at the same time, what a problematic person. And so every time I tell this story, I do have to qualify it with, I understand. David Mamet is very, very problematic, but simultaneously, he did me a solid, and I really appreciate it.
Time for Tatiana. You should know that the show that she has directed is part of this year's Fringe, Gentrification the Musical, has one final performance tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. in the Art Academy. Get your tickets at your box office on the way out because the show has sold out several of its performances, and rightly so. Before we bring out our next storyteller, I want to tell you a little bit about this incredible gentleman sitting over my shoulder. Preston Bell Charles III plays all around town, indoors and out, but he also teaches at the Wyoming Fine Arts Center, is the musical director of the Cincy Hip Hop Orchestra, which he founded during the pandemic, and has played all over the world. He also finds time to work for his father at the Preston Charles Funeral Home, and is the proud father of 2 daughters and a son. Preston is also a dedicated advocate for those affected disproportionately by the war on drugs, bringing awareness to the lack of attention given to mental health issues as part of his efforts. And he's also working on his second documentary, thanks to a grant from ArtsWave. For more about that and everything he's involved with, keep an eye on his website at makeithappenmusic.com. And if you should happen to follow him on Facebook, which I highly recommend so you get notifications whenever he goes to Facebook Live, which he does when he plays out quite a bit, be sure to look for him as Preston Bell Charles III, because Preston Bell Charles Jr. is his father, the funeral director, and his page has a very different vibe. Word to the wise. Now, our next storyteller started her performance company in 2007, has been doing solo shows since 2010, and surprisingly, and I say surprisingly because she's so damn good at it, only started doing puppetry work 4 years ago. She delighted audiences at the Cincinnati Fringe in 2015 with her first visit here with her show Kiss Around, Pass Around, and has been voted by Fringe producers this year to make her show an encore performance on Saturday. Give it up for the creator and star of Happy Go Lucky from Tokyo, Japan, Yanomi Shoshinz.
Hello. My name is Yanomi, just like you know me. I'm saying this for 100 times. I've been touring as a fringe artist since 2007. I'm a Japanese. I've never lived in outside of my country, but I've been touring around the world, meeting so many amazing people, including weirdos. For those who are not familiar to the Fringe, Fringe is a theater festival started in Edinburgh in 1947. Yeah. And most fringes in North America have the basic system like Fringe provides a venue and a tech person for the artist. Fringe provides a billet, which is the place for the out-towner artist to stay. You can stay for free with the local host family or some other artist. And most of the fringes are based on the lottery. Artists can apply to the lottery and will be chosen randomly out of the hat. Cincy Fringe doesn't have a lottery, so they have the curation instead. And some of the touring artists do multiple fringes in a year, so we can see each other in different fringes, but not everyone, not every time. I did my very first whole fringe circuit in 2010. It was 5-month tour. Yeah, insane, you know? I actually started in Singapore, but it was not the Fringe, but starting in Singapore, Orlando, Montreal, Ottawa, Regina. You know, Regina is a small town famous for its confusing name. Yeah, I got really confused at the first time, but you know. After Regina, Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Victoria, and Vancouver. Yeah, and my English level at that time was really low. And I was doing a non-verbal physical comedy called A Day in the Life of Miss Hiccup. Wearing the costume and the hat with the hundreds of flowers, with the white makeup as a clown. So whenever people talk to me after my show, I only said, thank you. I didn't understand what they were talking at all, but I just guessed they were saying something nice to me as long as they are smiling at me. Sometimes they might ask me some questions about my show, but I just say, thank you. And they seem to be very confused. I often heard the word of hilarious, and I assumed that meant something wonderful or amazing, something compliment. And one day I went to see another one-woman show about food bank and social issues. Then I said to her, your show was hilarious. I meant it was wonderful. But then someone else said, was it hilarious? Then I realized I made a terrible mistake. It's been quite a challenging and learning. Once, one of my friends told me during the conversation, makes sense? Just to make sure if I was following him enough. Then I said, what's the meaning of make sense? Make sense didn't make sense to me at all. When I was in Ottawa Fringe, I met a fringe artist from Australia. His name was Daniel Nemo. Nemo! Sounds familiar to me. He was sitting in the beer tent, and I said, hello, can I sit here? And he said, don't talk to me. Now, I'm sure he was just joking, but at that time, I was not sure. He was very weird and a little bit scary. Scary, yeah. Let's see, sorry. Scary. And he was doing his own show in the Fringe and busking as well. Busking is a street performance which people can enjoy spontaneously and then give the tips to the performers. Make sense? Daniel Nemo was tall, had a deep voice, and he'd been a professional performer touring for 12 years. I didn't go see his show. He didn't come see my show. In that year, I didn't get in the lottery in Saskatoon nor Edmonton. So I decided to do busking in order to get a billet. That was the only way for me to have the place to stay for free for 1 month between Winnipeg and Victoria. I had to do the busking as Miss Hiccup for the first time in my whole life. It was just scary. I had no idea. In Saskatoon, I met Daniel Nemo again, and he said, welcome to the dark side. I was very scared by his smile and his words. I'm gonna be in the dark side. My first outside show was terrible. Only a few kids were hanging around me performing. I got almost no tips. And Daniel Nemo was sitting far away from my stage, watching me. After my show, he walked to me and said, do you need some advice? Yes, please, I said. And then he gave me a few advice as an experienced busker. I really learned from him seriously. I had to do my show 3 times a day. And he gave me advice almost every day. So my busking show got better little by little. I got a little more crowds and I got a little more tips. But busking was still very, very tough. I couldn't afford enough food. My body ached and I was very exhausted. I cried a few times alone. When I saw Daniel Nemo busking, he had hundreds of crowds. And he was doing a very unique, exciting show on the top of a high ladder. I was learning how difficult to do the busking, so I really respected him. He was like a superstar. Yeah, and we became friends day by day. Daniel Nemo had another show inside the theater in the Fringe, but he was not selling well. And he said, I don't know how to sell my inside show. This is my first year to do the inside show. I went to see his inside show and I was amazed. It was completely different from his outside show. It was weird, but still beautiful, unique, and artistic. I believed he was a true genius, and I told that to him. And I told the details which I loved in his show to him. He was surprised, and he appreciated it. We became closer day by day, just like making friends with wild animal. Just a little by little. Theater artists often say, break a leg to the fellow artists before the show. But instead of that, buskers say, have a good one, or heavy hat. I liked that. I made many busker friends in Saskatoon and Edmonton. They are mostly very macho, easy to fight each other, and very aggressive. They looked aggressive to me. But they also came to see my busking shows, gave me tips, showing the cash to the crowds to encourage them to do the same. Daniel Nemo was performing in Edmonton too. He was performing inside and outside. At the end of my 5-month tour, I was in Vancouver Fringe. Daniel Nemo finally came to see my inside show and he said, you rock. Which made me so happy and proud. Vancouver Fringe had a flashlight cabaret night, which is just same thing happening here in Cincinnati Fringe tomorrow night. It's a one-night only special cabaret. The artists perform completely different pieces from their primary shows. I asked Daniel Nemo to collaborate with me. We made a plan, we rehearsed, which was very inspiring and exciting. In the show, Miss Hiccup asked Daniel Nemo, do you like my hat? And Daniel Nemo said, yes, I do. And then we sang the song, best friend, la 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 la, best friend, la 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 la. And we repeated the same conversation 3 times. It went really weird. And then finally, Daniel Nemo stole my flower hat and wore it. And then we came to the audience member asking, do you like my hat? And then audience member said, yes, I do. And then we sang the song together, all together. Best friend, la 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 la, best friend. And then we kept one after another. So we got so many best friends there. Our show was called the weirdest show in that year's cabaret. People kept singing the song for days. Best friend. At the end of the festival, I said to Daniel Nemo, thank you so much for all your friendship and your advice. You saved my life. And he said, you saved my life. Inside artists are always afraid of doing outside show, and buskers are afraid of doing inside. We're the only ones who did both. You are so brave. And I said, oh, it's so sad to say goodbye to you. And then he said, I've been doing this for 12 years. We buskers never say goodbye. We say, see you every day. Here in Cincinnati Fringe, many touring artists say, see you every day. I've never seen Daniel Nemo since then, but I do hope he's still performing somewhere on this planet. And I do hope to see him again, and he will smile at me in his weird way. I know the fact that I never know I can see all those beautiful friends and family again or not. Not only Daniel Nemo, but also you, all of you. That's why I always appreciate every moment that I have right now. I love Fringe. It's tough, but there's a Fringe spirit. I really hope to see you again. See you every day. ありがとう。
Yanomi Shoshinz! Yanomi's encore will be this Saturday in this space, not in Main Street where she did her run, but right here, 5 p.m. So get your tickets. I'm sure they're selling well. Our final storyteller tonight says serious things in a funny way and sometimes vice versa. She's a storyteller, a comedian, or an actor, depending on who's asking and why. She's written and performed solo shows, collaborative shows, TEDx talks, and even a sermon because she never refuses stage time. When not on the road, she lives in Rochester, New York with Foof, the cat, and 2 ghosts who only speak German. At least that's all they speak when she's around. In 2017, she brought this festival the highly acclaimed Spy in the House of Men, and once again moved audiences this year with the fabulous Schmilflife. Please give it up for Penny Sterling.
Jesus Christ, I haven't even said anything yet. I'm just blown away by the performers we've had here in Cincinnati, and I'm relatively new at this compared to some of them, but I'm discovering that if you are going to be a storyteller and a performer, you have to travel. And like I said, I've only been doing this for a couple of years, but already I've put some miles on my car. I've traveled as far west as Minneapolis, Minnesota, as far east as Washington, D.C., as far south as Richmond, Virginia, and as far north as, that would be Minneapolis again. I guess I didn't think this fully through. Fortunately for me, I really like to travel. I really like to drive, and I also really like to stop. Not just at the destination, but also along the way. And when you're driving long distances, your stops kind of come in 3 different categories. The first ones are the ones that you want to do, to stretch your legs or to see some scenic stuff or do something touristy. The second ones are the ones you need to do to gas up the car or get something to eat. And the third ones are the ones that you have to do. And I don't really need to say much more about those, do I? When you're a savvy traveler, you try to get all 3 of them at the same time, but sometimes that doesn't happen, especially with the third category. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about that from my travels, and I call this a tale of 2 tinkles. In July of 2017, I was heading north to Rochester, New York. I was heading back home from the Washington, D.C. Fringe, and I was in a rather sour mood. It was my third Fringe of that year, and it was by far the worst. I just come off of the Cincinnati Fringe, which I had a marvelous time at, and I loved the sense of community and everything that they had there, and none of that was at D.C. In D.C., they gave you a space, and they expected you to provide everything else, including your audience, and I had forgotten to pack mine. Plus, I was traveling through central Pennsylvania, which is the bane of my traveling existence. I had been traveling through that part of the country since I was a baby, since the 1960s, and I disliked it every single time. There was nothing for anybody to do, there was nothing for anyone to do, and so I was just driving through there and just not enjoying that at all. Plus, I had to go to the bathroom. Now, as any transgender woman who is on hormone replacement therapy can tell you, Spironolactone does a number on your bladder. It does a thing to your urgency. Urgency is the medical term for having to pee. And when you're on Spiro, it goes from urgency to emergency. And so I am driving north, and I've got my cruise control set at 78 miles per hour because my oldest son is a cop, and he told me that most police officers who are doing highway patrol have a motto: 8 you're great, 9 you're mine. And so I'm driving along praying to Saint Buster, the patron saint of scofflaws, that there would be no cops along the way, or if they were, they're ones that were friends with my son. And I was thinking, at least I get to choose when I stop, because when I was driving with my parents, if I had to pee, it was always horrible because my father would complain about having to stop because it would like put him off of his schedule. And my mother would say things like, think dry thoughts. Okay? Sahara Desert. Beef jerky. Cabernet Sauvignon. The humor of Stephen Wright. No, it's still not working. Luckily, I knew that just a few miles ahead of me in the town of Where the Hell Am I, Pennsylvania, there was a Sheetz gas station. And I knew that if I could just make it there, I would be okay. And so I'm cruising along looking for it, and I finally see the gas station up there. And I take the off-ramp at 70 miles an hour, and I pull into the gas station parking lot, and the only reason I didn't do a full wheel skid is because my anti-lock brakes refused to let me do that. And I've been in the Sheetz before, so I knew where the restrooms were. They were in the back left corner, past this wall of coolers, the walk-in coolers for the beverages. And I'm trucking down there, and there's a guy about halfway through there who's loading Pepsi products into one of the coolers, and he's just blocking the entire thing. So I'm going up to him, I'm trying to squeeze past him, going, excuse me, please. And there, at like 6:30 on a Sunday afternoon, in the middle of Where the Hell Am I, Pennsylvania, the Pepsi guy looks up at me and says, "Oh, hi, Penny. How was Washington?" I peed a little. And then I said, "I really want to talk to you about this, but I'll give me 3 minutes." Well, 2.5. And it turns out that this guy had a Pepsi distributorship that took him from central Pennsylvania to southern Ohio, and he had seen me performing here in Cincinnati a few weeks earlier and loved my show, and apparently even talked to me about it. And I felt embarrassed I didn't recognize him in his Pepsi uniform. I still don't know who he was. If he's here, thank you, hi, I'm doing well. And I got back into my car, and I continued my drive, and I was feeling an awful lot better about life and things like that. It was like the first time in my life that I felt like I had some notoriety. I'm thinking, I want to have more of this. It felt so wonderful. So let's fast forward 5 years, and now it's August of 2022, and I'm driving from Rochester to Minneapolis. A lot has changed in the past 5 years, and for transgender people, it has not changed for the better. In 2017, there were 50 different anti-trans bills that were introduced in state houses around the United States. In 2022, there was 196 of them. And every transgender person who is traveling by road will have in their mind a map of which states are safe and which are unsafe, the red ones and the blue ones. And I knew that compared to some of the places where I was going, Ohio was relatively purple. And I was driving along the Ohio Turnpike, and I had to go to the bathroom again. And there is the Blue Heron rest stop, and I pulled into there, and it looked pretty empty, so I was pretty happy that I was going to be able to go in there and be relatively unaccosted. So I get in, and I walk to the bathroom, and I open the door, and as I'm going in, there's a woman that's coming out, and we stop, and we do the excuse me dance, and I get past her, and the place was empty, which was a relief. And I went into the stall, and more relief. And I finished up and I went out and I washed my hands. And as I was washing my hands, I hear the door open up and two women, friends, who, and you know they're friends because they're chatting and laughing with each other, having some small talk. I'm not really paying any attention to them. And I'm finishing up washing my hands and they stop talking. And I'm not looking up at them, but out of the corner of my eyes, I can see their sensible travel shoes on the floor there. And then I see the shoes turn around and leave. And I think, okay, here we go. I steel my nerves, and I walk out, and there's no one there. And so I figured, okay, maybe I misread the situation. Maybe one of them forgot something, and they went back to get it because women travel in pairs and stuff like that. So it was one of those rest stops that had a food court. And so I went into the food court to see if there's something that I wanted to eat. And I was standing in front of Hardee's, which is not something you get in Rochester, New York, Hardee's. And so I'm looking at the Hardee's menu, and I'm trying to figure out what it is that makes a hamburger into a Frisco melt. When out of the corner of my eyes, I see the sensible shoes again. And this time they've brought two men with them. And I look at them, and they're looking at me, and one of the sensible shoes points at me. Now it's time to go. And I look around, and they are standing in the only path between me and my car. There was an emergency exit over here that would sound an alarm, and a transgender woman running from an alarm is not the sort of thing that you want. And they're standing there, and they're looking at me. Okay. This is what I did. And I made my face as neutral as I could. And I turned and I walked directly towards them. And as I walked, I stared them in the eye, one at a time. I started with the largest man. And I looked at him as I was walking. And I looked at him until he looked away. Then I went to the other man. I looked him in the eyes until he looked away. And then one woman and the other, but she had already looked away even before I got there. And I walked up to them. And I did not turn my shoulders. I walked straight through them. And I calmly walked towards the door. I didn't turn my head around, but I was looking in the glass as I was walking there to make sure that nobody was trying to attack me from behind. I opened the door, and I walked calmly out to my car. I got in my car, and I started to drive away. And before I even got to the on-ramp, I started weeping. At first, I thought I was weeping because I had all of this energy inside of me, all this adrenaline, and all of this fear about what was going to be happening to me, what could possibly happen to me in that place. And then I realized that underneath that, I was also disappointed because I wanted to kick the shit out of them. I wanted to kick the shit out of all of them. I have been accosted online and in person so many times with claims of being a groomer and a pervert and a pedophile. I have 4 children. And I raised my 4 children mostly by myself. And I made sure that my place, my house, was always a safe place, not only for them, but for their friends. And to have them, not knowing me, call me a pedophile and having to take it, I wanted to get into a fight with them. I have been hit since I was a child. It doesn't bother me. I don't like it, but it doesn't bother me. And then underneath that, there was something else. When I was younger, from about the time I was 15 until I was nearly 40, I was an asshole. I was loud and large and mean. And I would get into fights, and I would scare people. And I would not only use that, but I'd use my size and my voice to get my way all of the time. And I realized at around 40 years old that my family was terrified of me. And that's when I started to get better. And I started to work on myself. This was still 15 years before I transitioned, but I had made a pact with myself. I told myself that I wanted to be the sort of person that no one would ever be afraid of again. And I made those people afraid of me. And I'm so fucking pissed at them that they made me make them afraid of me. In 2023, there have been 556 anti-trans bills introduced in state houses across the United States, more than the last 3 years combined. And if they're going to make me a man, they are not going to like the man that I become. Thank you.
Keep it going for Penny. Folks, that's our show. Let's give it up again for all our storytellers tonight. Amica, Tatiana, Yanomi, Penny, Preston Bell Charles III, Becca on tech, everybody associated with the Cincinnati Fringe Festival, and you. We always say at True Theater that it takes two people to share a story, one to tell it and the other to open their hearts and to listen, and tonight you did just that. Thank you so much. We hope to see you next year at True Fringe 2024, or maybe next month at True Gift, but until next we see you, be true.